Erin Eisenmacher,
I
you gift to this world. I thank you for making the time to be here with us. Thank you for the way you show up in the world. I feel so grateful to be in your orbit.
Oh, well, as my mama used to say, we have a mutual admiration society. I feel the exact same way about you.
Mm. So, my friend, I want to kick off right into it here because we are recording this at the end of November, like the bitter end. We're getting into end of year. And I feel as if, I just had this conversation with a friend. You can just get so tired, just so exhausted of doing all the things. And you're used to sprinting, and you feel that if you're not sprinting, then you're behind. Digital world doesn't help with that. So I would love to hear from you, my friend. Do you have any rituals that you do at this time of year to say, you know what? I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to recognize all the shit that I did do versus trying to keep sprinting. What does that look like for you, my friend?
Such a good question. So I'm a big believer in rituals. And
Mm,
one of my favorite rituals, again, also gifted to me by mama,
mm,
is actually not at this time of year, although I'll circle back to what that looks like too, but is on my birthday, which happens to be in April, although I suppose if your birthday was in November or December, it'd be perfect timing, um, is what she used to call the birthday talk. So you basically just take a moment to acknowledge that, you're turning over into a new year,
mm,
and regardless of what the last year has looked like, it's uniquely yours and you're never going to be there again. And so you take a moment to just say, when we were little, it was like, what were the best things about being 10? What were the most fun things that happened? What were the hardest things about being 10? What are you excited about to be 11? What's scary to you? What do you want to create in the next year? And what do you want to leave behind? That was always a big one too.
mm,
Um, I think for me, I'm so glad that you asked that the way that you did because I'm a big believer in celebrating successes. I just
mm,
feel like, to your point, life is short. It's always going to give us more to do. It's always going to give us hard things. And so we need to take the time, I think, if we really want to be, fully happy and present and living, to intentionally make space to celebrate those successes. I'm working in a startup now, and things are, I joke around that everything happens in dog years and everything is, 200 miles an hour. And so much
yeah.
of that is exciting. But we were, sort of grappling with the business problem, and things weren't, sort of lining up the way that we wanted. And it was like, oh, if this isn't working. And I just took a step back and said, and actually it was partially a conversation with our advisory board, because I had been on the advisory board in January. I started full time in April, and then I was just like heads down. And we came back together, and it was all about, what unlocking kind of this brand story that we were grappling with. And in January, we sort of were completely flummoxed. And by the fall, we had completely rebranded, launched a new brand campaign. We're infusing it into all these different, areas of the business. Had stood up this brand new academy and line of products that didn't exist before. We had our best revenue month ever. And so it was a good reminder to take a step back and say, yep, we are, there are very real challenges we face, and we have to be real about that. But we need to take a moment to go, oh my God, look how far we've come. Look what
Mm,
we've done in 6 months. And I was sharing that with a colleague. And then I intentionally decided to share it with the full team on one of our Friday meetings. And it's like, you just see people light up. People, we need that. It's like water or fertilizer for a plant. You need to be reminded, what you've impacted, what's going well. This is, I think, a fairly common practice, Meg. I know you do this in some form or fashion. I do too, which is to make a gratitude list
mm,
before I go to bed every night. And I just think that whether it's, in our personal lives or work, and increasingly really thinking about those things holistically, it's so important to just stop and take a moment to think about, what's going well. Because the thing is, the things that are frustrating today are the things that you would crave when I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on your podcast, but the
Oh
shit really
God,
hits
yeah.
the
I think I already did, girl. Yeah.
when the shit hits the fan, right? And we've talked about this. Maybe we'll dig into it. I mean, one of the things that happened to me this year is we had a devastating house fire and lost basically everything we owned. So, I
Mm,
mean, when hard things are going to happen to all of us, I'm sure most people listening to this have already, can already name a few doozies that have knocked them for a loop. And so I just think it's really important to acknowledge the successes, the wins, the beautiful things as they're happening. So I guess that's a very long way of saying I don't have a specific ritual for this time of year. It's really something I try to infuse throughout the year, and that touchstone of the birthday talk with my mom is a powerful one. The one thing I do that has really become a grounding practice for me over the change of the years is two things. One of them was a gift from I call her my other mama, my one of my best friend Delia's mama, Deetra Jackson. And it's you write a letter. She calls it a letter to God, but you write a letter to yourself in June of next year, and you basically say, you just acknowledge how far you've come, and you talk about all the things you hope are true in June of next year. And she used to go to a church where they would collect them all and then mail them to you. So for years, I would just get one, and I would intentionally have mine mailed to work so that, in the mid, exactly to your point, in the middle of what would probably be, something chaotic, I would get this beautiful letter from myself. I've now I just do them on my own, and I hide them in a, special box, and then I put a reminder on my calendar and I go get it. So
oh
that's
my
one
God, I
thing.
love that. Girl,
Yeah,
you
go ahead.
dropped so many great nuggets. There were three big things that I got out of that beautiful conversation that you laid on us. One, tell people. Tell people when you see that they've grown. Tell people when you see that they accomplished this thing. I think we live in like this jealousy culture, and it's so great when someone can share with you an act of kindness, say, hey, Erin, you killed that. I've seen such growth in you because people can see things in us that we can't. I love that. I also love the gratitude journal. And I love that you do that before bed. Love that. And I also love the letter to you. What a power move. What a power move.
Yeah,
And
it's been so beautiful. Yeah, go ahead.
I love how you talked about, and we've talked about this, you and I, many times, and you've weaved this into the conversation several times already, which is your mama. We were both raised by single women. Oh, strong, loving single women. And when you look back in your journey as a childhood being raised by a single mother, how do you think that that has led the path for who you are today?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I have to just say, starting out, because I've gotten more appreciation and a lens on this as I've gotten older.
Mhm.
I'm very lucky because my dad was still very much in my life, and he remarried when I was 8, and I have an amazing stepmom, and they both also helped raise me. But so just I'm lucky. I just
Yeah.
want to acknowledge them because my mom is such a force, and she was such a
Mm.
force in the world, and she's such a has been and still is such a force in my life that I feel like they can get lost. And so I'm trying to be better about just really centering that first. But yes, so my mom, wow, so many things. My mom was just this amazing mix of like really fierce, but like really loving. And she was someone, I come by it honestly, she was someone who always not just found joy, but created joy and created fun, and was always, things were, she could make a ritual out of almost anything. She used to tell me this story about, we lived on the corner, and there was like a lot between us, the house I grew up in, and this little corner store we would walk to when I was like a toddler. And she would talk about how I would stop and I would, pick up pieces of, trash, like a candy wrapper, and that, a lot of parents, your inclination would be like, oh, like that's dirty, don't mess with that. And she would always say, I just loved that you had that wonder and curiosity, and I wanted to nurture that in you.
Mm.
She said, we can go home and wash your hands, but to squelch that sort of spirit of discovery and curiosity and oh my gosh, what is this? And like, what does it mean? And what could it do? And that was more important to her than us getting dirty. And so I feel like that just really, that encapsulates so much of who she was. She went back to college and finished her degree. She dropped out of college to have me. She got pregnant with me when she was 19. And she went back to college, finished her degree. We were on public assistance to do that, to augment what she was getting from my dad. We were on public assistance. So I also have that lens, which has been a real gift, right? To kind of grow up in a way where you're feeling like you just know, what it's like to kind of live check to check, hand to mouth. And I'm thankfully not in that position now, but to have grown up that way and really understand it in my bones is something I'm also really grateful for. And so there were a lot of people who, said to her, go get a job. Why are you going back to school? This is selfish. Like, go get a job, take care of your kids. And she was always really clear, like the best thing I can do for my girls. I have three sisters, but at the time it was my sister Annie and I. She said the best thing I can do for my girls is to show them, to go for it, to think big and dream big and go for your dreams. So that was one piece. And then later, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It didn't affect her as much when I was young, thank goodness, I think for all of us. But certainly as I got into middle school, high school, into college and beyond, watched her struggle with something really gnarly that would bring a lot of people to their knees. And she just continued to show up in a way that was like, I am going to make the most beautiful life that I know how to make. This is the last thing I'll share. The story I always tell, and I think I shared this with you, Meg, when we had coffee when you were here. The story I always tell anyone if they've never met my mom, because it's like, it's so hard. It's like, to me, it's like trying to describe a sunset, trying to capture who my mom was, let alone what she meant to me. But about 6 months before she died, fairly suddenly from complications from MS, but certainly way sooner than any of us were expecting. But she, about 6 months before she died, she went to Dubai by herself. She was fully in a motorized wheelchair that she just lived in. She was like beyond the ability to even transfer into bed. At that point, she had effectively the use of one arm, and she booked this trip to Dubai and figured it all out. And our Christmas letter that year was like my sister, and her husband in their new house, me like getting a big film award at South by Southwest, and my mom having tea at the top of the Burj Al Arab. And, she just figured it out, she just figured it out. And she was never going to be limited by, certainly not by what anybody else thought she could or couldn't do, but even by her own mind and her own fears. And she is really someone who, faced a lot of really scary stuff and leaned into it. And I'm not saying she didn't have bad days or she wasn't scared, but she really taught me that, scary things are part of life, and, that leaning into them usually makes them less scary. So anyway, those are some things about my mama.
And Erin, what would you say to the mama listening? Whether she's doing it alone, like our mamas did, whether she is doing it with a partner that is struggling the mom guilt, because it's a real thing. I hear it from my friends all the time. The anxiety, the guilt, the overthinking, the wondering, am I jacking my kid up? What would your advice be to that woman who is struggling with all those things? Any words of wisdom?
You know, I am not a mom myself in the traditional sense. I have a lot of kids in my life. I'm super close to my nieces and nephews. And even there, I feel like my relationship with my niece in particular, she's 13 now, and I think I'm an even more important outlet for her. So when I'm traveling, she's always texting me like, "Where are you? When are you coming home? Why aren't you with me?" So I get a little taste of it. I get a little taste of the full experience. I think honestly, from what I'm surrounded by so many children in my life in terms of watching my friends parent and being, an auntie to all of those children. And in my experience growing up, I think honestly, it sounds cheesy, but I just think it's true. I think the best thing you can do is love your kid and love them for who they are. Really
Mm.
understand kind of who they are and where they're at, and meet them there and make them feel seen. I feel like so much of the rest of it will sort itself out. And also, we're all jacked up. Like nobody gets out of childhood,
Then unscathed.
unscathed, right? So I think if you just lean into the fact that regardless of, the kids that have everything, in terms of, money or material things or support, they're going to feel like, oh, we didn't rough it enough. The people that, the stuff that are hardships are the things, again, it sounds cheesy, but it's so true. Like those are the things that give you, the tools and the resilience and the grace and the lessons
Mm.
for when you get older, all the things, like all the things that people would have, said to my mom, oh, you're going to mess your kid up getting divorced, being on public assistance, like all the, my mom, letting us kind of, explore the world and be a little bit more adventurous. There are a lot of people that would say like, oh, you're not being a good mom, you're not keeping your kids safe. And they are the biggest gifts for me. I feel like they've made
Mm.
me resilient. They've made me kind, compassionate, and empathic. So in terms of, first of all, I also love the quote. If you're asking yourself as a mom, oh my God, am I screwing this up? Am I doing it right? The answer is, yeah, you're doing it perfectly
Oh, I love
just by
that.
asking the question. So I just think, figure out who your kids are, what it means to them to be seen, and lean
Mm.
into that. And I think so much of the rest of it sorts itself out.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? It does. I will tell you, at 40, I had this moment the other morning. I saw this quote and you would love it. It made me think of it as you were talking about lessons and the journey and the realization that all of it had to go the way it is to get you to a certain point. And when you can have that moment of reflection, it's so powerful. And I heard this from Wayne Dyer, and I know you'll love it. And it was, when you look at your life like a clock, 1 to 6 is all about the lessons learned. You're gonna bruise, it's gonna suck, you're gonna hate it, it's gonna feel like an army crawl. But 6 to 12 is when you use those lessons and you really come into yourself
Hmm.
and you put that out into the world. And I want to ask you, my friend, I was thinking about you this morning, the courage that you've had in your life to, in so many ways, that you've shown up. The fire, I want to talk about that, losing your mother. But what I want to talk about right now is the fact that you left this job that you were damn good at and was your identity. And you leaned into that gut whisper that said there has to be more than that, than what I'm doing. Talk us through that.
Yeah. That, I feel like that has been its own version of an army crawl because it,
God, girl. God, preach.
I
Know
love
it.
that visual. Um, I think I left you're absolutely right. I was there for almost a decade and it was amazing in all these ways.
Mm-hmm.
I made so many amazing contacts. I built things I'm so proud of. I, worked with this amazing team that is still like in many ways like a family to me. Uh, but yeah, it was just time to go. And I think, I left sort of at the beginning, of the pandemic. I left in May of 2020. And I think that sort of leaving that and not just leaving it and going into like the typicals, we would sort of, okay, you lose your day to day, you lose sort of the people needing stuff from you and
Mm-hmm.
that title or however, whatever you, to your point
Mm-hmm.
about your identity. But I think, I hadn't really thought about it this way until you just asked, Meg, which is part of your gift, is being able to ask those questions and bring out these deep truths. I think we were all sort of going through a collective loss of identity, right? In different
Mm-hmm.
ways, right? Whatever that looked like. Even if you still had your job looked totally different. If you were used to, seeing your friends all the time or, the places you would go or like the ways that you would connect. I mean, so much of those things are an important part of our identity. And so I'm actually really glad you asked it because I'm realizing that a lot of the things that were hard for me in that transition were actually also universal. And what I love
Mm.
about thinking about it that way is it goes from making it feel really lonely to actually something that connects all of us. And it, maybe looked a little bit different for everyone. But yeah, I think we all went through this collective loss of identity in different ways, ways big and ways small. I mean, God, the people that lost people, I mean, talk about a loss of identity, right? When you lose someone who's close to you and what that person means to you and how you connect to that person. But in terms of, coming out the other side, a couple of things that I, in hindsight, have really leaned into and I've appreciated is one of the things I realized on the other side of that, and it's serving me as I think about what I want to do next, is
Mm-hmm.
I have really good instincts.
Mm,
Like when I think back to like so many things, in the business where I would say, hey, I think we should pay attention to this trend, especially when I was, newer in the role. Or, I think this would be a good thing for us to invest in, or maybe this is an acquisition we should look at. And I was told a lot of the time, you're young. I was the youngest person on the senior team. As you know, I was a filmmaker and I was a media professional before I got into business and corporate governance kind of by happenstance. So there was also this sort of uphill, climb of this isn't, you're new here, right? You're the new kid, you're young, you're the new kid, and you're new to this whole space. But every single one of those big things, I'm not saying I had it all right or I didn't make mistakes, but those big strategic things, when I look back, my gut was almost always right. And
mm,
so I think what that has
mm-hmm.
helped reinforce for me, and then again, I think this is true across the board, but it can especially be true for us as women, right? It's so easy to second guess ourselves and to doubt ourselves. It's like that very, that cliche, or not cliche, it's proven by data, but we bring it up all the time, right? That the whole, if you see a job description and if a typical guy has 3 of the 10 things, he's like, I'm applying, and a woman has to have like, 8 to 10 to apply. I just think what I'm just really appreciating just leaning into like all of like the magical things that are me, to your point, like
Mm.
I made a ton of mistakes. I've learned I'll continue to make mistakes and learn, I hope, I that once that stops, we stop growing and I never want that. But it's like I've spent so much of my life, trying to, you know, analyze like what I could have done better and taking, all these strengths finders and, all the assessments and just trying to figure out how to show up better. And certainly, that self-awareness and that growth I think is important. But so is, and it almost comes back to your first question, like when do we just rest? And resting doesn't just have to mean doing nothing. It's like, how can I still be in my life doing my thing, but rest in it? Just,
Mm.
just rest in the knowledge that like, girl, you've done amazing things and you have some hard won lessons and you're good at what you do. Like, it's okay to just own that, you're a good leader. It's okay to say, I want to be in charge because I know that, when I'm in charge, I can make good things happen. And I'm good to the, people I work with. So just being able to lean into those things. So I think that's part of what I've come around to over these last 3 years of, and some of it was going through that identity crisis, to your
Mm.
point of not having that job. I was consulting and working with amazing clients and doing some really cool stuff, but not having that structure and that same kind of purpose, to get me out of bed every morning. It was really tough. And even though I know logically, and it's the advice I'd give a friend, exactly what you said, your identity, we all know like your job isn't your identity, but when it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to actually
Yes.
move through it when it goes away, especially after 10 years of having it. And so I did go through some really tough moments where I was really questioning myself and thinking like, maybe I've peaked, maybe that
Yeah.
that was the best. And if, I don't feel that way anymore, but I had to kind of, and I think that's another good reminder. Like it is so important to lean into gratitude and all the things we've been talking about, but it's also really important to just be in it when you're in it and let yourself
Oh,
be in it,
I love that.
and actually be in it so you can move through it.
Yeah, not numb it, right? Not go to the booze,
Yeah.
not go to the next
Mhm.
thing to numb it. One thing that I got that you said, Erin, that I wrote down and I put asterisks all around was awareness. I've, as you were talking about the trusting your intuition, giving yourself the space to hear it, awareness is such a gift. Like when you have that whisper that says there has to be more than that, it's a gift. It's nothing to be
Mhm.
terrified of. It's going to be a little mucky for a hot minute or two, but you're talking to yourself and you're onto something really, really great
Yeah.
and finding yourself. And Erin, what would your advice be to the listener right now that is where you were, where I was, that was terrified to leave the thing, but knows that they're meant for more and not sure where to start and they're scared shitless? What would you tell that person?
A few things. One tool that, and I use it all the time, it's like I love the phrase getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think anytime, anything you want to do to grow, whether it's taking a bigger job, being a parent, for the love of God, is there anything more terrifying than being a parent or having children you love, children you love in your life? And it's like, so it's anything, right? But in your career, if you want to learn a new skill, if you want to travel alone for the first time, whatever it is, I think this idea of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is so important. No growth happens without discomfort.
Mm,
I'm not someone who I lean heavily into the gray. I'm very much like it depends and very much about the nuance. But this is one thing I feel very sure about. There is no growth without some kind of discomfort. Doesn't happen, doesn't work. It's like the law of gravity. And so I think that when, to your point, and you said it so well, that discomfort sometimes, even though to your point, it's gnarly and it can suck. I'm not minimizing that at all. It is pointing you in the direction of, it's pulling you towards something. It's giving
mm,
you some signs. And so I'm a big fan of, journaling, even if it's just when you're feeling gnarly like that, writing it down and just write down how are you, no one has to ever read it. Just get it out. Sometimes just getting it out is good. Sometimes the process of writing down how you're feeling gives you the clue to the next thing.
mm,
I work with
mm-hmm,
an amazing coach who I love, Sonia Miller, and one of the things that she talks about is the ALI method. So when you have a feeling, and actually you can do this with, when you're overwhelmed with joy as well, right? It's like a manifesting trick, but I think it's also really good for sitting with discomfort. Is when you have a feeling, the A is you acknowledge it.
mm-hmm,
I'm having this feeling. You just let it in. Like, okay, come sit. You might be a lovely, partner to have a cup of tea with, or you might be a raging asshole who's screaming at me,
yeah.
but come sit, come sit, come sit. You're here, you're in my house, so come sit. So that's then the come sit into the, like, let's have a cup of tea together, is the L. Let it be here. Just
Mm,
acknowledge it, let it be here. And then the I is intention. You just say, how does it get even better than this? And
mm,
that can be great if you're having the most amazing, thing happening to you, but it can really be, and even if it can really be powerful when it's especially powerful for me, I'll say, when I'm having tough feelings, those gnarly feelings. And even if you're not someone who's, believes in manifesting or is big into that, even just to say, how can it get even better than this, is an acknowledgement that you will not feel the way you feel forever, that you've felt better before, that you've been in tough spots
mm,
before and moved through it. So that's just like an easy, like immediate tool that I use all the time. And then I would say, not for, I know sometimes cost can be an issue for folks, but don't underestimate the power of a really great coach,
mm,
and someone who can who's not so, having friends who will listen to you and talk you through it and give advice are amazing. Even colleagues who will do that for you, great. But somebody who isn't invested in your life in the same way, doesn't know you as deeply, in some ways can be better, right? And can help you kind of see through your own blind spots, because it's almost nearly impossible for us to do that by ourselves. So those are some things that I would say. And then the other thing is, especially if you're feeling some version of down on yourself, like I moved through when I left my role, take a moment and let's, like, write a letter of recommendation for yourself.
mm,
Write a love letter to yourself, whatever that looks like, but just to your point, and again, you're so wise, Meg. I think all of it keeps coming back to the beginning, right? Which is, take that moment to acknowledge, what are you, and I don't mean updating your resume. I mean, just if you were going to be like, this girl is awesome and this is exactly why you should hire her or date her or be her best friend, whatever
mm,
it is, write those things down. And again, it can maybe feel cheesy sometimes, but why? Who else, who's telling you that ever? Like, right? You need to do that for yourself. If we were lucky, we had parents that did that for us. Not everybody has that.
I
Or
love how
amazing friends. But anyway.
I love how you keep coming back to the writing, Erin, because I have to tell you, so many people think that you need to be a writer. You don't need to like it. You don't need to be a writer, but it's amazing who you get to know in the process. I have to tell you, my friend, therapy, I just never felt a connection to it. I can be a little stubborn. Talk therapy has been hard for me. And the best form of finding myself has happened, as you said, with the few moments before I let the rest of the world in, or when I feel uncomfortable, or when that gremlin starts chirping, or when I have the gymnast in my belly. I go to pen to paper and I just
Mhm.
free it out. Doesn't even need to make sense. Hell, I don't even reread it.
Yeah.
But it's been powerful. And the other thing I love that you said is about, if you can, investing in a coach, or look at your benefits through your company. There's a lot of companies now that are hiring coaches through some mental health apps as well. I know my friends at Cigna have all of these great offerings. So check that out. And what I got from that has been a goal of mine is that caring for yourself doesn't happen alone.
I like that.
I think for so long, and I'm curious if you struggled with this, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And I think a lot of it comes back to my own childhood abandonment issues with my father, the whole thing. Uh, as I have struggled with putting down my guard, not now, but at points I still go back there of saying I need help, of saying, "Hey, can I talk to you? I'm struggling figuring this out with anything. Like I feel that I need to figure it out myself." And I have told myself so many times, "I got it. I'm good. I'll figure it out." And what a disservice I did to myself when I had a tribe of people to help me. How do you deal with that? Have you always been open to raise your hand and say, "Hey, help me," or has that been something you've navigated through in your journey?
Yeah, no, I've definitely had to learn it. I mean, to your point, being I'm the oldest, so right there, it's just there's that piece of it. So you're kind of always in this mode, kind of from the beginning of being the one who's sort of, if mom and dad aren't there, you're figuring things out. And for us, we again had my sister and I had these, great parents, but we just the nature of the way we grew up, it was the common denominator was always the two of us. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and my sister, she still, we're only 14 months apart, but my sister was shy growing up. She struggled with, which we didn't know at the time, but undiagnosed anxiety. And so I really felt a strong need to kind of protect her and figure things out even from a really young age. Like she always says to me, even now, I'm 48, I'm not going to have kids of my own, but she always says, I know you'd be a great mom because you were a great mom to me. We're only a year apart. So 100% that. I think, it's part of it is just the survival mechanism, right? If you don't have to rely on anyone else, if you can figure everything out by yourself, then you'll be safe, right? It comes down to that. I think though, if we talk about, I remember being in a situation where um, things on the paper sort of work, at work, on paper, the way that things worked out is sort of, um, I, I sort of lost in this struggle that was happening. And I was talking to someone who was looking at the person who won, and it said, he's a survivor. And I thought about that for a second and I said, yeah, but I don't want to just survive. What a
Mm.
what a what a really small and sad and hard way to like live this beautiful life we're given where there's so much abundance if we look for it. Like I want to thrive. And for me, even though on paper I lost, it was what it did was free me up to be in a situation where I wasn't playing tug of war and
Mm.
just trying to survive. I was like, you know what? Not only you can have the game, I'm going to go do something else. And
Mm.
I think exactly to your point, Megan, what you've figured out. I think for me, it's happened by building a chosen family. Even though
Mm.
some people build a chosen family because they don't have a great family. I'm lucky to have both, but I've built this amazing chosen family of friends, and watching the way that they show up for each other, watching what it means when you show up for somebody else. But also, I think the biggest thing for me has been realizing there is a gift in allowing
Mm,
people to help you. We all need to feel needed. And it's a way that we actually strengthen connection. And the most important thing to me are my connections, are the people,
mhm,
are feeling connected to my tribe. And so I think for me, understanding that it wasn't just about asking for help means, oh, I'm weak and I can't do this myself, or I'm helpless and therefore I need to rely on you. It's really that becomes its own kind of love language or conversation you're having with the people around you. And it certainly with your friends and family, but I think it's also how we build bonds at work, right?
mm.
It's how we build that connectivity. It's like and that's also where sometimes when it starts to feel one-sided, then you have to take a look at that and look at that. But I think it's that. I think it's understanding that asking for help and taking help when it's given, in the right situations is not just about the help. It's really about building bonds with people in your community, whatever that looks like, right? Whether we're talking about
Mm.
your family, work, your bigger community. I remember the first time that really hit me. I was probably, I don't know, in my mid 20s, and I was reading Oprah magazine and these little tear out cards with quotes. And one of them was her quote. And she said something like, accept the gifts that people give you,
Oh,
take their cookies, take the compliment, like we think we're being self-deprecating to go, oh, this old thing, or no, thanks for telling me I look great. I've actually gained 10 pounds.
yeah.
Accept they're get people, if when you give someone a gift and they swat it away, how would that make you feel, right? When people are offering, when it's done in a genuine way from the right place, and people are giving you compliments or offers of help, they're giving you a gift. We would never see somebody giving us a gift and like take it and throw it in the trash in front of them, but we do it all the time with other things. And so I think understanding that has really changed my relationship to how I think about asking for and receiving
Oh God, I
support.
love that. Put that on a bumper sticker, put that on put that on a hat, put that on a t-shirt.
I love that
Accept
hat.
accept the gift. I love that. In my reading the other morning, and it stuck with me. Every morning before I let the rest of the world in, I have a little meditation, a little spiritual connection. And it has been just a game changer in how I show up in the world and the conversations I have with myself. And it said, there is so much power in when you allow yourself to be aware and
Mm.
lean into life's little coincidences because nothing is a coincidence. And when you can see that, it frees you and it gives you peace. And I was like, oh God, I love that. So I want to talk to you about my friend. One of the things that I love so much about you, there's so many things, but this energy that you have, this peace that you have, the way you look at obstacles, the way you digest them, the way you show up for people in your life. And the common theme when we had that beautiful coffee date, which felt like such soul food, was this spiritual connection that you've learned to make your own and the trust that it's given you, the how it's given you courage. Can you share with our listeners what that journey's looked like for you, how you've built this spiritual connection and how it's changed how you've shown up in the world?
Yeah. Well, again, I keep coming back to her, but there's a reason for that, I guess. I think again, I had this amazing model in
Mm,
my mom where from the outside we were going through things that looked really hard, but we were, every night she would, play Drunken Sailor on the guitar and we'd get all the pillows in the house and make a pillow fort. Or, there's this famous story of, she was studying for finals and we were hungry and, all we had in the house were like saltines and peanut butter and jelly. And she made them into like little sandwiches and put them on a doily. And she was thinking like, oh, I'm the most terrible mom. And the next thing she knows, my sister and I are having a tea party and we're all dressed up saying this, why don't you make this all the time? This is the best thing ever.
mm,
So I think I'm so lucky, and I've always known this, but I just appreciate it more and more every year as I get older to have had a model of again, these things that can sound cliche or cheesy that like you don't choose what happens to you, but you choose how you react to it.
mhm.
My mom used to always say, like, listen, you're either laughing or you're crying, so you might as well be laughing, and not to say that it's not okay to cry, but it's like in those moments when things are hard, I think it's also being able to have both things be true, right? That this thing can be really hard and feel really shitty. Like it doesn't have to be, you don't have to just be happy and that means that this goes away. It's understanding like this thing is shitty, and it goes back to the gratitude journal, right? So like
Mm,
where can I find this little pocket of light or joy or fun? You know, I am a cancer survivor. I had cancer in my early 30s, and you know, I think going through that experience, I just reinforced for me, you know, what a gift growing up that way was. Because same thing, you know, it was sort of like, okay. And there were, you know, there were definitely days where I cried in my bed because things hurt, or, you know, I was at the time that it was the same year that my mom died. That whole year just completely upended my life. And, you know, my career at the time was kind of like flying high. It was getting all the success that I'd always wanted. And like the rug was completely pulled out from under me. So, you know, what do you do? It's like, I think I just had to keep leaning into like, what are those beautiful moments? And for a lot of it, it was, what are those beautiful moments that are bigger than me? You know, I kept this
mm,
blog, and I just, what it allowed me to do, because it forced me to slow down. And you've talked about this a lot already in our time together. It forced me to notice things that I did
mm,
just wasn't noticing when I was going too fast. Like, and I ended up having all these beautiful conversations with strangers, and it just really, I think, because when all these things kind of fell away, it created space for me to just be present.
mm,
And so I, yeah, I just, I just don't think there is no such thing to me as good and bad when it comes to these experiences. It's all, my mother would say, it's all copy, right? It's all, or Nora Ephron would say, my mom would always say, it's going in the memoir. But it's all part of the curriculum. It's all part of like what we're here to do. You know, when I think about this all the time, like when we get afraid, right? We hear about a mass shooting, or
mm.
you know, global warming, or there's wars happening, like you know, we're worried, you know, oh, crime's on the rise. What are we worried about? We're worried that we're going to ultimately, right? The fear is being killed, or someone we love being
Yeah.
killed, and then we spend most of our lives in this thing that is like so precious. That is the thing where most of us are the most terrified of, is it being taken away from us. And we keep it in this tiny little box under the bed, and like never look at it and never take it out and never play with it and never like, you know, try to figure out how it actually works. And so I'm struck by that a lot. It's like we have all this fear, you know, and the fear is actually what a lot of times keeps us from fully living. And how ironic is
Mm,
that, right? It's
mm.
like the fear of dying, or doing something that's dangerous, or fear of other people because of, you know, what we're being told, and or what we're hearing, or just how that manifests in our heads. That fear is ultimately a fear of dying. When I just peel the onion back all the way, like that's the fear. And that fear is what keeps us from truly living. And so I just really try to lean into that and just remember that. And I look, as Mr. Rogers would say, I look for the helpers. Strangers being kind to each other is the thing that will make me cry the fastest. And I promise you, if you look for it, you will see it 10 times a day, every day. And I just, you know, I look for those magical moments, like when a great song comes on in the car, or I'm thinking of a friend and I, you know, take 5 minutes to call her or text her, and just like that little shot of connection, like what that means to me. If I have a really great latte and just think like how blessed I am that I have the $4 to spend on this, and it's yummy, and just take a minute to appreciate it. That stuff can start again. It can start to, we can be like, oh, it's cheesy. Like that's life. Like why are we
Mm.
here if it's not to just experience it and be in it, and to be joy seekers and try and find those moments. And so I think I definitely am lucky because I was very much raised that way, but I've been given plenty of hard things that have
Yeah.
given me the opportunity to build those muscles. And you know, the last thing I'll say about this is it's also been, you know, such a gift. Like when I think about going through cancer at the age that I did, it was really hard. Like 2010 was the hardest year of my life, right? I lost my mom. It was just really hard in all the ways. And I also say I've never felt more loved.
Oh,
And I've always, you know, my people, my friends, my community showed up for me in ways that like still just choke me up thinking about. But the other thing it did for me, again, I've always tried to live this way, but we're human. We're, like
Mm-hmm.
we're all, doing our thing, type A, wanting to be successful, whatever that looks like. I was very much in that grind. And it was going through that was so clarifying to me. And it continues to be such a gift because when it comes to showing up for my people and having a choice to do that or pretty much anything else, I will always pick showing up for my people.
Mm.
And that was mostly true before, but it was always like I would agonize, like, oh, if I miss this meeting, if I don't go to this thing, like, am I going to get enough FaceTime? Are they going to like me?
Mm.
I don't even have those conversations with myself anymore. I am just so clear. I was on this whirlwind trip and it was already kind of nuts in terms of the logistics. And I was going to be on the West Coast for something. And I have a good friend who's like the brother I never had. He was a roommate that from my, late 20s. And I'm still good friends with him and his whole family. So his wife texted me and said, hey, I know it's a long shot, but Keith's 50th birthday dinner is Monday. I know you try, just, I know you probably can't make it, but just wanted to put it out there. And it was like, I was on my Southwest app in 10 minutes. Like, what am I going to say? Like, oh, I'll come to the next one when Keith turns 50 again. It's not going to happen. So, I mean, of course, you can't always make that work. There are some times where obligations and big work things have to come first, but it's become a very, very fine filter for me. And it's become just such a gift because I don't stress about 2/3 of the stuff or 3/4 of the stuff I used to stress about. It's very clarifying.
And I believe that all of that, my friend, has transpired. It's built above itself like a game of Tetris, right? It's built above itself because of these small micro steps that you just talked about the finding the moment of enjoying that sip of the latte, of being aware of looking for these acts of kindness when people do kind things for each other, of sending the message to the friend when you
Yeah.
think of them. Doesn't need to be a whole long big thing, can just be, hey, thinking of you. That's it. That these things start to stack, they start to build. And I love that because I think that that is a beautiful way to start for our listener that might be thinking, I don't even know where to
Yeah.
begin. I don't know what spirituality means. I don't know where to start. That's a beautiful way to start.
Yeah.
And I love that. So, my friend, for our listeners that are obsessed with you, like I am, where can we stay connected with you? Where can we find out more of your beautiful words and who you are? Where can we stalk you?
Where can you stop me? I kept a blog while I was sick that's still active. If anyone is interested in checking it out, you'll definitely get a sense for that spiritual piece. It's dragonslayingprincess.com. But you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Erin Essenmacher in the world, so I'm pretty easy to Google. And my email address is just my full name, erinessenmacher@gmail.com. And then I am, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn in terms of, posting articles I've written, sharing other things I think are great. I'm also Chief Strategy Officer for the Athena Alliance now, and we have a blog, and I post a lot there as well. But there's one other thing, if you don't mind, Meg, I wanted to
Please.
share as sort of a as it is when you were saying kind of people that don't know where to start and how do you build that gratitude muscle. And again, I think it comes back full circle to your question about it being the end of November. There is nothing that is more clarifying in terms of giving you gratitude for where you are than acts of service. And especially when it
Mm.
is, being with other people who don't have what you have. And so, one of the easiest and I find most rewarding ways to do this is find a family that needs adopting for the holidays. Find a
Mm.
family where the adults in the family don't have the resources to give the kids the Christmas that they want. And you can do that through churches. You can do that through all kinds of volunteer organizations. Um, but it is the quickest way. When you see adults basically saying, I would like some socks for Christmas. And, it makes you really, it does. It just reinforces, like it starts to build that muscle of even when things are hard, looking for the things that you have to be grateful for. So I think this is a perfect time of year to do that. It's an easy thing to do. I promise you it'll make you feel amazing and you'll make someone else's holiday
Mm.
in the process.
Thank you for sharing that, my friend. And thank you for sharing your nuggets with our tribe. I love you. Keep sharing your wisdom and your lessons learned in the world and keep showing up the way you do because it's a beautiful gift, my friend.
Oh, well, ditto to you. And thank you so much for having me on. I know who you are, Meg, and how you show up and what you stand for. And so just the fact that you wanted me to be a part of this is such a big compliment and an honor. And I just love you so much. And I'm happy we got to spend time together this morning.
Love you too.